You're a time traveler who just landed in ancient Egypt, and the first thing you see is a completely naked priest doing something in broad daylight that would get you thrown in jail anywhere on Earth today. Except, here's the kicker. Everyone's watching and cheering because this is literally the holiest ritual of their entire religion. I know that sounds completely insane, but this actually happened every single morning in Egyptian temples for over 3,000 years. And honestly, it's not even close to being the weirdest sexual practice these people had. You're about to discover 5 absolutely mind-bending things the ancient Egyptians did that archaeologists kept hidden from the public for decades. And trust me when I say the last one is so bizarre that when scholars first translated it, they spent years arguing about whether they were reading it wrong. We're about to jump into this absolutely wild ride through history's most shocking civilization. But first take a second to like, subscribe, and settle in. This is the Nile Files, the place where history is stranger, funnier, and far more human than you remember. So here's the thing about ancient Egypt that nobody really talks about. While we're all learning about pyramids and mummies in school, there's this whole other side to their civilization that museums literally kept under lock and key because Victorian-era archaeologists were so scandalized by what they found that they actually destroyed some of the evidence rather than let anyone see it. These weren't just a few weird people doing strange things in private either. We're talking about official state-sponsored religious ceremonies, medical treatments that royal physicians prescribed, and traditions that shaped the most powerful empire of the ancient world. Stuff that was so normal to them that they carved it into temple walls where kids would see it every day. The evidence for what I'm about to tell you comes straight from papyrus scrolls that survived thousands of years buried in the desert, temple inscriptions that were meant only for priests' eyes, and archaeological discoveries that are still being decoded today because scholars can't believe what they're finding. And look, I get that some of this is going to sound like I'm making it up, but every single thing I'm about to share has been verified by multiple archaeological sources, which makes it even crazier when you realize this was just normal life for millions of people. Let's start with practice number 1, and I'm beginning here because compared to what's coming, this one's actually kind of tame, even though it involves something that would shut down any modern church immediately. According to the ancient Egyptians' most sacred religious texts, the entire universe exists because their creator god, Atum, stood alone in the primordial darkness and basically pleasured himself into creating the first 2 deities. And no, I'm not paraphrasing or using euphemisms here. Their actual religious texts explicitly describe the god creating life through masturbation, and they thought this was so important that priests recreated it every single morning. Here's where it gets even weirder, though. Priests would literally lift up a statue of Atum each dawn and sprinkle water over the temple floor to symbolize this act of creation, and they believed that without this daily ritual, the sun wouldn't rise and crops wouldn't grow. But wait, it actually gets crazier because the god Min, who was in charge of fertility and harvests, was always depicted with a massive erection in every single statue and painting. And during his festivals, people would parade through the streets carrying giant phallic symbols while throwing bread shaped like penises into the Nile River because they genuinely believed this would improve their harvest. Greek historians who visited Egypt couldn't believe their eyes when they witnessed these festivals where thousands of people celebrated what every other culture in the world considered shameful and private. And one of them wrote that Egyptian families would bring their children to watch these parades like it was completely normal entertainment. The really wild part is that farmers would actually have contests during these festivals to see who could maintain an erection the longest, and the winner was considered blessed by the gods and would have women literally lining up to sleep with him, because they thought his blessing was contagious. Moving on to practice number 2, and this is where things start getting genuinely disturbing by modern standards, because we're talking about something Egyptian royalty did for literally thousands of years. Marrying and having children with their own siblings. When scientists analyzed King Tut's mummy using modern DNA technology, they discovered something that shocked even seasoned Egyptologists. His parents were definitely brother and sister, and the inbreeding was so severe it caused him to have a clubfoot, scoliosis, and an immune system so weak that a broken leg basically killed him at 19. But here's the part that'll really mess with your head. Egyptian pharaohs didn't see this as gross or wrong at all. They actually preferred marrying their sisters because they believed it kept their bloodline pure and godlike, since their gods, Isis and Osiris, were married siblings too. Cleopatra married not just one, but 2 of her brothers. And Ramesses II, who's literally one of the most famous and powerful pharaohs ever, married at least 4 of his daughters and had children with them. And this wasn't some secret shame either. It was recorded in official documents like it was totally normal. What's even more insane is that regular people sometimes did this too, not just royalty. Census records from villages in Roman-controlled Egypt show that up to 25% of marriages were between people claiming to have the same parents. If you're feeling uncomfortable right now, I totally get it. But maybe grab a drink before we continue, because what the Egyptians did when they wanted to party makes modern spring break look like a kindergarten playdate. Practice number 3 is where things take a turn into territory that would make modern religious people lose their minds, because we're talking about the Festival of Drunkenness, an official religious celebration where getting blackout drunk and having sex with random strangers in public wasn't just accepted, it was literally considered a form of worship. This festival happened every year to commemorate the time the goddess Hathor got so wasted on beer that looked like blood that she forgot she was supposed to destroy humanity. And the Egyptians decided the best way to honor this was to recreate it annually with the wildest party you can imagine. Archaeological evidence from temple sites shows they had industrial-scale brewing operations that could produce literally thousands of gallons of beer and wine just for this one festival. And we're not talking about light beer here. This stuff was specifically brewed to be as strong as possible. Ancient texts describe scenes that would make Vegas look tame. People stripping naked in the temple courtyards, strangers hooking up in sacred spaces, priests and priestesses leading the celebrations while completely hammered, and everyone believing that the more pleasure and chaos they created, the happier the goddess would be. But here's the really crazy part that archaeologists discovered. They found evidence that women would specifically time their menstrual cycles to be fertile during this festival, because any children conceived during the celebration were considered blessed by Hathor, which meant you had thousands of people actively trying to get pregnant with strangers' babies as an act of religious devotion. Just when you thought the Egyptians couldn't possibly get any weirder with their sexual practices, wait until you hear what they were putting in places where the sun definitely doesn't shine. Practice number 4 is going to sound like I'm making this up, but I swear on everything this is real and documented in multiple medical papyri from ancient Egypt. When Egyptian women wanted to avoid getting pregnant, their doctors, who were considered the most advanced physicians in the ancient world, would prescribe them a contraceptive suppository made from crocodile poop mixed with honey and fermented plant juice. And women would actually insert this into themselves before having sex. Now, before you completely write this off as insane, modern scientists have actually analyzed this and discovered something that blew their minds. Crocodile dung is highly alkaline, which creates an environment that kills sperm, and the fermented plants produce lactic acid, which also works as a spermicide. so this disgusting concoction actually might have worked as birth control. But the medical treatments get even stranger, because when men had erectile dysfunction, Egyptian doctors would prescribe them blue lotus wine, which we now know contains compounds similar to Viagra, and massive amounts of lettuce because when you cut lettuce, white sap comes out that reminded them of semen. Women trying to get pregnant would sit naked over burning incense mixed with special oils, letting the smoke go up into their bodies because they believed it would prepare their wombs for conception. And the absolutely bonkers part is they had a pregnancy test where women would pee on bags of wheat and barley seeds. And if the wheat grew, it meant a girl. If the barley grew, it meant a boy. And modern scientists tested this and found it actually detects pregnancy hormones correctly about 70% of the time. If you've made it this far without throwing up, congratulations. But you might want to sit down for this last one, because we're about to enter a realm of sexual practices so bizarre that modern scholars literally refused to translate them for over a century. We've reached practice number 5, and prepare yourself because this is the one that historians argued about for decades. They couldn't believe it was real, even with evidence staring them right in the face. Multiple historical sources, including Greek and Roman historians who visited Egypt and the infamous Turin erotic papyrus that was kept hidden from the public for over a century, describe how certain Egyptian temples employed priestesses who would perform sacred sexual acts as part of religious ceremonies. And these weren't considered prostitutes. They were holy servants performing the most sacred duties imaginable. The Turin erotic papyrus, which is basically the world's oldest surviving pornography, shows detailed illustrations of what went on in these temples, with priestesses wearing the ceremonial items of Hathor engaging in every possible sexual act with priests and worshippers. These priestesses, called Hemet Netjer, which means servants of the god, would supposedly embody the goddess during certain rituals, and having sex with them was believed to bring divine blessings, cure diseases, and ensure good fortune. Here's where it gets absolutely insane. There's evidence that during certain festivals, the pharaoh himself would perform ritual sex acts with priestesses in a ceremony designed to ensure the fertility of the entire kingdom. The pharaoh would act as the earthly representation of Osiris, while the priestess embodied Isis, and their union was supposed to recreate the cosmic forces that kept the universe running properly. Archaeological excavations at the Temple of Hathor at Dendera uncovered hidden chambers that only high-ranking priests could access, and the walls are covered with carvings so explicit that even modern archaeologists struggle to describe them in academic papers. What makes all of this even more mind-blowing is that the Egyptians didn't see any of this as immoral or wrong in any way whatsoever. To them, sexual energy was the creative force that literally kept the universe functioning. They believed that without these practices, without the priests performing their morning rituals, without the festivals where people got drunk and hooked up, without the pharaoh's sacred unions with priestesses, the gods would abandon them and the world would literally end, which explains why they kept doing these things for over 3,000 years. The everyday sexual lives of regular ancient Egyptians were just as surprising as their religious practices, with women having more sexual freedom than in any other ancient civilization we know about. Marriage contracts show that women could divorce their husbands for basically any reason, including sexual incompatibility, keep all their property, and even get additional compensation if they could prove their husband couldn't satisfy them physically. What's really fascinating is how much of this information was deliberately hidden or destroyed by the Victorian-era archaeologists who first discovered it, because they literally couldn't handle the idea that an ancient civilization they admired for its architecture and art could have such radically different sexual values. These practices reveal something profound about how differently humans can organize society and morality across time and cultures, because things that would get you arrested or shunned today were considered holy and necessary for the survival of civilization just 3,000 years ago in one of history's most successful empires. So there you have it, 5 absolutely insane sexual practices from ancient Egypt that prove reality really is stranger than fiction sometimes. From gods creating the universe through self-pleasure and pharaohs marrying their own daughters, to festivals where entire cities got drunk and had public orgies for religious purposes, to priestesses having sacred sex in temples while people used crocodile poop as birth control. If your mind is completely blown, drop a comment telling me which practice shocked you the most. Was it the sibling marriages, the drunk religious festivals, or the temple priestesses? If you want to learn more absolutely wild historical facts that they definitely didn't teach you in school, hit that subscribe button and join us here on the Nile Files. See you in the next one, where we'll dive into another shocking chapter from the past that your history teacher was definitely too afraid to tell you about.